Welcome to I think, one of the most awkward rooms at the Dev Summit. We've got a monitor there and there, so you guys are both looking that way, and we're just going to talk this way. I'm Jeremy Bartley, Program Manager for ArcGIS Online and our JavaScript API. And I'm here with Paul Barker and Chris Whitmore. And I believe, Paul, what's your degree? Geology?
Geology.
Okay. Chris, geographer? Geography, and I'm geography. Okay. All geos, 2 cool geos and 1 nerd geo. We've all been working on online for a long time and are excited to talk about some of the enhancements about managing data in online. We have stuff, I think, that covers both what's released and what's coming in April. April 10th is the next update of ArcGIS Online. We'll try to be very clear about what's coming when, if there's any confusion. And although this is supposed to be about online, we should also cover any 10.6, 10.6.1 type things as well. There's a lot of similarities, but there are some differences between enterprise and online. Okay. So we'll cover about ArcGIS Online and how you can get your data into ArcGIS Online. The feature service is the main thing when you publish your feature layers. It's really about turning that data into information. We'll talk about from once published, you can create many different view layers. And then get into how you can manage your data in online by overriding layers, updating data, controlling access to your data, managing metadata, and then just a little bit on what's coming in the future in this area. Not too much. ArcGIS Online is a mapping platform. It's accessible to anyone. You can create and share maps and apps to anyone in your organization or to the public. You can use it to store and edit information. Of course, you can combine layers to create new maps. You can create different types of visualizations to map the story that your data tells. There's lots of different sharing options that we have in online. And then a key piece is the effectively managing data. Really, feature layers are the heart of your data in ArcGIS Online. Everything really grows out of that. It's the equivalent in the WebGIS world, it's equivalent to the feature class. It's really the starting point of your WebGIS. When we say it's equivalent to the feature class, we basically mean it's the feature class and the feature data set all in one. Because your hosted feature layer represents your data, and it's also the layer of information that you would use. It's flexible, fast, supports editing. In online specifically, we've been spending a lot of time over the last year improving how we deliver your feature data from online to wherever you are in the world. We build in a lot of caching at different levels, and that's really what makes it fast and scale. Some of our biggest usage times, of course, are during times of disaster, like the hurricanes last fall, or big snowstorms that come through, or on election night maps. And we have a very small DevOps team in online, and we need to make everything as scalable as possible so that you guys have the confidence that your feature data, no matter how many millions of people are accessing it, gets to them fast. So we spend a lot of effort in that area. The feature data, your feature layer can be used offline and have the changes synced. Paul also used to work on the collector team, design collector, and has a lot of experience in this area. But that's a key workflow to be able to collect data using the collector, Survey 123, and be able to take that offline. We have flexible publishing options. You can publish from Pro or desktop. And you can also publish from online. We actually support a lot of different types of source data when publishing, from a CSV to an Excel file to GeoJSON, file geodatabase, shape, feature collections. How many of you are already using ArcGIS Online? All right, good chunk. How many publish shapefiles? Okay. How about file geodatabase? Okay, about the same. CSVs? A little bit, yeah. Any GeoJSON? Couple? Oh, okay, cool, that's good. How many publish from Pro or desktop? All right, cool. That's a good breakdown. Pretty evenly distributed across all those. There's been a lot of work to improve the publishing at both tiers, whether it's from Pro or directly from the website itself, or through some of the Python APIs. So this is an area that is under great, a lot of work is going into. If let's say you don't have data and you really just want to collect information, you can start with one of the feature templates in Online. These are designed to work well with Collector. They're kind of a preset data model. And we think with some of the new advancements that we're adding in 6.1 to help you easily be able to add data into it, it's really going to be a good starting point. And I think we'll cover a little bit of that. Yeah. And then what's really cool about once you publish your data in Online or in Enterprise is it's ready to be used anywhere by any client. So you can get the data out in almost any format, whether it's OGC like WMS, WMTS, WMS on Enterprise, excuse me, not in Online, or WFS as well. So that's, or getting it back out, exporting it out as JSON, as GeoJSON, as a shapefile, file geodatabase. Basically everything that you can put it in, you can get it back out. So we want to make it really easy to get data in and really easy to get data back out. Yeah. Anything else to add, Paul? Okay, so let's do a few demos on publishing data and creating views. Actually, could I see a show of hands who's used views before, feature layer views? Okay, not quite as many. Well, let's go through. I'm gonna add a file, and I'm gonna pick this Hurricanes CSV, and hopefully this works relatively quickly on this internet. This is about an 11 megabyte CSV file. It's got a lat long in it, along with several bits of attribute information. When publishing a CSV or a Excel document, you have the option to either publish it with coordinates, like locating the features by your coordinates, or by doing geocoding, or just by adding it straight up as a table. This layer already has coordinates, latitude, longitude. It found those for me, and it'll just default to that. And it's got the other types of information here. Now this is a pretty good tip right here. When loading data in, make sure that the field type that we guessed is appropriate for you. So let's say if that wasn't appropriate, then I could pick from one of the other field types. Usually it does a pretty good job, but if you've got data that maybe in the first few rows looks like a number, and then later on it becomes a string, those are ones that you'd want to try to catch. And this is also very important. What's the time zone when you load if your data has a date and time in it? This part is very important if you're going to actually use the hours on your date fields. By default, everything stored in Online is in UTC. So clients will always pull out in UTC, and it assumes when data is being added that it is also, the dates are also UTC. So in a lot of cases, this is true. Like this hurricane data set, it's already been normalized to UTC. But in other cases, you need to go understand from your source, is it in that time zone? Is it in UTC in your raw data? Or is it stored, like, let's say, in Pacific time? And if it was, I could pick that time zone here, and then we would apply the offsets and make it work correctly for you in online. Also, like a fine point, if your CSV actually has the offset in the value for the date field, then it'll just pick it up from that. So some cases you might already include the offset in your date field as an actual value. And in that case, that'll take precedence over anything else. Okay, let's go ahead and publish this guy. So now we're publishing the service. This is an area that has improved in performance over the past 6 months, really greatly reducing upwards of 90% of the publishing time. Right? That's, yeah, pretty much. Huge improvement. And but I'm sure it'll take a long time here since I'm talking through it. Some other things to sort of call out. Well, this is publishing anything, guys? I don't think so? Okay. Okay, good question. What do I mean by the offsetting in time? If you're, let's say in your date field you have, December 21st, 1997. Well, that's actually December 21st, 1997 midnight. That doesn't have any offset, so we would assume UTC. But if your date actually represented, let's say Pacific time, you'd want to offset it by Pacific. Now, let's say the date actually gave an hour, like 7 a.m. on that date. Again, if you just cut it there, we don't know what the time zone is, so we would assume UTC unless you told us different. But now let's say your data set said 7 a.m. minus 8. That would equal to Pacific time, Pacific Standard Time, I believe. So in a lot of cases, data will come that way, and it'll just work. And in other cases, you'll need to, apply the offset. Yep. All right, and you got me through the publishing, so good question. Okay, so now that this thing is published, there's a few things to sort of look at. First off, we have all of the fields that were in that spreadsheet are now part of this table view. I can go in and look at some of the details. This show detailed view. We'll go through, show me a histogram along with the average value for this data set. Give me some metadata about the layer. And you're going to cover this unique part, right? Yes. Yeah. Paul will cover that in a minute. From here, I can also do any kind of calculation that I want. This calculation is SQL 92. This is going to update the table, just like if you were, at a SQL prompt applying some SQL expression. We support standardized SQL by default, and that would be SQL 92. And there's probably not much else to say about that. Also, you can delete the field. You can add a new field, and you can append data to this layer. And if we go back to the overview, we'll see that this CSV just had that one layer, because that's all I had. It was hurricanes. But let's say I published a file geodatabase that had 3 different feature classes inside. Those would show up as 3 sublayers here. To call out some of the things about what you get out of this, the ability to export this. So I can easily get it back out as one of any of these types. I could export an individual layer. So this is all one layer, so it all comes out that way. But if this was like 3 layers, like I said before, I could export an individual one. These layers also advertise a few of their settings, like whether I want to time enable this layer or enable attachments. The settings tab is also a good place to go when configuring any of your items, but especially for feature services. There's some general properties about whether you want to mark the layer as authoritative, or maybe you want to mark it as deprecated so it's harder to find. Delete protection. There's no recovery if you delete something. So basically, you need to have confidence that you're not deleting anything you don't want to be deleted. And from here, there's many different settings about editing, which we'll get into in a little bit. And you also get the choice about whether or not you want other people to be able to export your data. By default, it's off. But if you turn this on, and anybody who has access to this service will be able to export it in all the formats that we showed before. Do we say anything about this new feature, spatial indexes? No? Do you think it's worth it? There's a new feature coming out in April about managing spatial indexes, basically to just rebuild. This probably won't affect most people because usually the spatial index is correct. But if you do a lot of editing outside of the initial extent, then this is something that you might need to do if you have lots of data. This is also doesn't seem right to have this many hits, so I'm not sure. I published this earlier today. So it's based off of the name. So let's get that one for now. Okay, and then I just want to call attention to this source here, this under the details. So the source is this feature service, and it's created from this Hurricane CSV. If I open this item, it's actually the CSV item that I uploaded to publish. Now at the bottom, you'll see the REST URL. Now if I view this REST URL as the owner or the administrator, I'll be able to get to the admin API. How many of you know about the admin API for feature services? Okay. Good, not too many of you, because you can really screw things up. To get to the admin API, it's rest/admin/services. And from here, let's open the help. Sorry. We have a bug when going on our QA server. I think that's a different bug. We'll have to get fixed. Okay. We'll show the REST API admin help, but if you want to find out about the REST admin features, go to the developer site, into the admin capabilities of the feature service. From here, I have things that I can do to the layer. If I go to this update definition, I have the entire JSON schema that makes up this layer itself. And some of these things I can change. So before, we didn't have the ability to update this indexes, and you would need to go here and go to the layer and then update the index with this JSON. And that would make it up to date. So there's less and less times where you need to go to this level. But since it is a developer conference, I wanted to just call it out. There are things that you can do here that you can't do in the UI yet. Probably the most common thing is the ability to edit domains on a field. And I don't know, that's probably the main one. That's about it. And hopefully by UC, we'll have that in the UI. Yeah. Okay. A couple other things before I get to views. So from here, I can also publish different layer types. So I can publish a tile layer, which Chris will talk about. I can publish this layer as a WFS endpoint and also a scene layer. You're not talking about that. Are you talking about that? Huh? No, were you? I'm sorry. No, I wasn't. Oh, no, that's okay. And scene layer. A thing on WFS, I mean, don't publish as WFS and then use it online. WFS as a specification is not as rich as the ArcGIS REST API, so we can't take advantage of a lot of features that make things go fast. It's really about serving to other open clients, desktop clients that can work with WFS services really well. Okay, now let's get to the interesting part. View layer. So let's create this. Actually, let's do Pacific. And so a view layer is just like it sounds. It creates another view into your hosted feature layer. And from this layer, I can do many things. I can set who can access it. I can set editing capabilities. I can set different visualization types. I can also define what's available from that view. So now that this is published, a couple of things that you'll notice. I've got this feature layer. It's a hosted view. And now if I look at the details, the source is that feature service, but it's created from this Hurricanes feature layer. And by coming into that Hurricanes feature layer, that's the parent, now I'll see that it's been published as a specific Hurricanes view. All right, let's actually get into the map. Okay. Back up just a little bit here. All right, start to see more and more data. Now, of course, from here I could do all of the mapping styles. Like maybe I want to map it just by category. And let's do it by, as a unique type. Lots of dots, not that interesting. Maybe we'll do it by the wind. And do color. And let's do above and below the average in this data set. Still not that interesting of a map. Okay. So now, when I come back here and save this layer, this visualization is going to be saved directly into that view. Now, a couple other things that we can do. Because it's a view, I get this option to set the view definition. And I get this option because I own it or I'm the administrator of the org. And it lets me do several things. I can define the features that are available. So maybe I'm only interested in Category 5 hurricanes. And not that many Category 5 hurricanes. Now, if I were to save this view now, the users would only be able to see that Category 5. They wouldn't have any access to the underlying data that's not returned via that filter. I can also do things like define what attributes are returned. Let's say that you had secure data or data that was important to not share with everybody. You could decide to, no, I'm going to turn all of these off except for these 5 attributes. And did I turn off the one that was being rendered? I think I might have. And then if I go and look at the, let me switch here. Turn this thing off. Ah, there we go. And then I just see those 4 attributes. I don't have any access to the other attributes that were part of this. This is all available today. Let me go back and change this slightly. Turn these back on. And let's turn this filter off. And let's do define an area of interest. So now from here, I can geographically define an area. And pan over here, trying to get more of the Pacific. Oops, saw some dateline bugs there. And apply that. It's saving that geometry directly to that view, and then only going to expose the features that are within that in that geometry. Hopefully. There we go. This is on QA, so we may have some bugs to work through. Now, let's look at the table here. Now we've got 23,700 features. So that's less than, I think this is like 175,000 features in that CSV. But then I can even do other things like, let's say, turn on clustering on this data set. Clustering is another visualization style that's available. I could do things like, let's do that wind attribute and really focus on, sorry, invert this. So I've taken that source data, defined it to be just this area, could have removed some of those attributes, and I've clustered them all in one view. I can save this view and now deliver this view to this view layer to anybody, and then that's what they'll see, and that's the data they have access to. Is there anything else that I missed, Paul or Chris? Okay, does that make sense on views? Any questions on views? What's that? The question is, can customers edit the view? And yes, we'll show some of this in a little bit. Or no.
Customers can't edit the view.
Oh, I thought you said edit the data. No, yeah, customers can't edit the view. Only the owner and the admin can edit the definition of the view. Sorry.
But they can't edit.
They can't edit the data if you choose to enable editing on that view. No, the data will now update in that underlying service, but it won't change the editing settings on the original service.
I'm assuming the view could be more permissive than the base feature service?
Yep, you can share this view to the public and then keep the source one to yourself. Ooh, good question. Does the view layer consume credits? No, just the storage of the original data in the feature service is what consumes credits. The views don't consume any credits.
So, if you said about editing, got this area of interest which you carved out, and somebody edits this data and moves it outside of the area. You're from the view?
Yep. It'll go in, but it'll disappear.
Yeah, you can apply that edit, and then the next time that, you may see it on the screen temporarily because of the browser cache, but when you reload that service or refresh the layer, that feature will disappear and no longer be accessible to that user.
Just one more, because I think we're going to miss all the other great stuff.
Does it have to be a hosted feature layer?
Yes, it does have to be a hosted feature layer. There is the old school copy layer where it's both pointing to the same service and you change the renderer, change the definition. That is still doable. and it doesn't have to be a hosted one, but you lose all the benefits of information hiding, the ability to not, keep access to share the access differently, and the ability to control the edit settings. Okay?
All right. Let's hop over to this input. Let's see.
Updating data?
Updating data. So, any Canadians in the room? Anybody work for Elections Canada? All right, cool. So what I've got here, I'm going to walk through a little demo to highlight some of the new features that are coming down the pipe in Append. So today, if you go to ArcGIS Online, you can use Append. We've got a number of really cool enhancements coming down for the next release that Jeremy had mentioned in April that are going to add more flexibility and let you do more things. And at its heart, Append is really about adding new information and updating existing information. And you can either do that in 2 discrete operations, or you can actually do that all in one step as what is called in the database land as an upsert. So it's an insert of new rows and an update of existing ones. So it gives you a lot of flexibility on how to manage data. This is a feature that's in online only right now. We are looking at putting it in Portal in future releases, but it's not there yet.
10.7.
10.7. So before I dive into Append, I'll just talk a little bit about what I'm doing here. We're not going to cover Arcade in detail, but I am using Arcade to drive the renderer on this elections map. It's pretty boring right now, and if we click on a feature, we're going to see that there's no votes. We've got the kind of 5 main parties in Canada from an electoral perspective. There's nothing in there right now, and that's okay. We're going to load some data in. But if I look at the expression, I'm actually I'm using Arcade to create a pretty dynamic expression. So what I'm doing is actually getting an array of fields I want to consider, which is denoted by that $ feature, and then the field name, I'm giving it an alias, and the alias is what I want to show up in the legend. And what it's going to do is look through across all of those 5 fields, find the field that has the max value, and then it's going to return the string so that I can use it in a unique value renderer. So I don't have to manually continue to calculate this after I append data of who's winning in an in-progress scenario. It's living, it's live, and it just always up to date. So pretty handy. We're looking at sharing some of our example Arcade expressions to you guys and try and build a community around it. So you'll see some more of that. But right now, it's a pretty boring map. So let's get some data in there. So to load data, you go to your feature service. You can do it from the data tab, or you can do it straight from the item details page. And I'm going to append some data. So I'm going to go here and pick this zip file. It happens to contain a geodatabase. So I'm going to switch this over and say that's a file geodatabase. It's going to upload it to ArcGIS Online temporarily as an item, and it's going to do a little bit of analysis on it. And in this particular case, my geodatabase has multiple feature classes in it. So for the purposes of this demo, I don't want the final results because that would spoil the surprise. I'm going to use East Coast results. And if I go down here, I have the option to update existing features. Right now, you only see Object ID. And Object ID and global IDs are what's supported today in ArcGIS Online. You can join and update existing data. We know that most of you don't manage, through the Object ID. You have your own internal ID that's unique. So what you can do now, and you'll be able to do in the April release, is actually define a field within your data model that you manage as unique. And so if I go to the show detailed view of the field, right now you're going to see a new option come April that's a flag to set it as unique. And I can come down here, I can say, I want this field to be unique. And what it's doing behind the scenes is actually generating a unique index in the database. And from there on in, that field is going to be unique and enforced. So the index has been updated successfully. We've validated the existing data is unique. So now when we come back in here and append data, that field is going to be available to match to existing records. So I'll just repeat this process quick. Give it a few minutes to update. And so if you had an asset ID, maybe you got a parcel number, something unique to your data that's meaningful, you may, where that comes into play is if you're managing aspects of that information in external systems, it now is easier to come in here, pull in new information, update it. So now when I come here, I see FedNum, which is the electoral number. If I expand here, I can see that I've got a series of really poorly named fields, but they've all matched because they all have the same names, and I'm going to switch it from the final results in the geodatabase to East Coast, because we're going to we're going to do 2 stages here. So I've got the East Coast results. I'm going to call apply. What that's going to do is take that data in that feature class for just the East Coast, and it's going to apply it to the existing feature layer. And so if we come back here, and we'll just refresh this quick, we should see the East Coast of Canada light up red. There we go. So if I click here, I can see the Fed number, I can see the current votes. The Green Party very rarely gets votes, and the Bloc Québécois is actually a party that's solely unique to a province. So it's kind of a weird federal party when you think about it, because it only really represents one party, but they do very well in Quebec sometimes. So I've got intermediate results, and now if I came back here, I could actually, if I was doing this on election night, I could periodically do this throughout the night, and as polling stations started reporting, I could update that data on a cadence that made sense for me. And so just to complete it, I'm going to go back to the same geodatabase, because it happens to contain my final results. I'm going to upload it. Wait for it to finish. And so I've got the final results of my geodatabase. I'm going to quickly go through here and apply those updates. And one of the neat things about Append, you'll notice if you start playing around with it and using it, it's very fast. It is as fast as publishing in many cases. So they have very similar performance characteristics, which is pretty nice. So as you get periodic updates to data, you're loading that in quickly. Sorry, Oh, the question was, where did I access Append? So it's from the item page. So if you come here, we have update data, and that's where you'd find overwrite, if you could overwrite the data as well. Additionally, if you went to the data tab, in the menu for the data, you can actually hit append as well. So if you come at it, like Jeremy mentioned, feature services support multiple layers. If you come at it from the item page here, you're going to get a pick list to choose which layer on your feature layer you want to append data to. If you come from the data tab, we show that information on a per layer basis, so you won't have to pick that. Yes? Good question. Is it overwriting your existing data or adding new features based on things? So it is overwriting. In the case where you choose, I want to update existing features, what it's doing is you provide that matching, and it will update the attributes or geometry, if you choose, for the records that match. If you notice, this option isn't available today, but it is available very shortly. You'll have the option when you check that box to say, I want to update existing records, there's another box there that says skip results without a match. So if you had extra data in your uploaded geodatabase, you can opt to ignore those. And if you left that unchecked, anything that didn't match would get added. So you can actually update and insert all in the same operation. So if you're in that workflow, it's really convenient. You don't have to do multiple runs of this. So. Great question, and I'm going to show that in a few seconds. So that's great. Nobody wants to do this manually. So one of the things that is in the latest release of the Python API is the ability to automate this. So if you haven't used the ArcGIS Python API, I'd really encourage you to take a look. It's a really great way to provide some scripting to the WebGIS model. So I'm going to use a different data set actually for Append, and all I'm going to do is import data. So like Jeremy was talking about, if you're using one of the feature service templates in ArcGIS Online, you can leverage that existing data model, tweak it a little if you need to, and then load your data into it. And so in this particular case, Workforce has a very similar pattern where you spin up a series of templated feature services as part of making a Workforce project. And then you could manually assign assignments, or in this case, what's more likely is you're exporting assignments from some external system and looking to add them to Workforce. So I'll just...
Could you zoom it in?
yeah, I can probably, let me see here. Enhance. All right, can everybody see? So there's a little bit going on here. The first little set of code right here is I'm just loading a JSON file, and the JSON file just happens to have my credentials in it. The only reason that code's there is so that I don't have to show you my username and password. So next, I'm going to log into the GIS. So sorry, I'll expand this. So I've imported my ArcGIS GIS module. So I log into my GIS, I pass it a portal, I pass it my username, and I pass it a password. And I pass it the item, I set the item ID of the feature layer that I want to append data into. And I'm going to go out and use the ArcGIS Python API to actually get that feature layer. In the case that it had multiple layers, you pass it the layer ID. So now I've got my feature layer, and I'm gonna call append. So what I've got right here is a file on disk that has hydrant inspections. And I'm gonna upload that to ArcGIS Online as a temporary item and use that as part of append. So I'm going to pass it a little bit of metadata just so that I remember to clean it up later. And I'm going to use the Python API to just add that as an item. So one line of code, I pass it the source file, the CSV, the item properties, and it adds it to ArcGIS Online. And so the next piece of code here is actually very specific. You would only need to use this analyze function if you were working with CSVs or Excel. And analyze, so what you do is you actually call analyze, and you get the results of analyze, and you pass it to append as the source info. Other than that, append's pretty straightforward. If you've used different REST APIs or geoprocessing, it all looks very familiar. I specified the upload format type. I give it a set of field mappings between the origin and the source and destination. So in this case, I always get confused. The source is the file you uploaded. It's the source of the changes. So if you get mixed up and thinking the source is the feature layer, it's the other way around. So I'm going to tell it that I don't want to update existing data. And I'm just going to pass it an array of fields that I want it to actually use. And rollback on failure, what rollback on failure does is in scenarios where it runs into an error, maybe you had corrupt data in your file or something went wrong, rollback on failure allows you to undo the whole append operation if that's possible. So I'd always enable it as true. So if we ran this right now, with a little bit of luck, it's going to upload the file, it's going to call analyze, it's going to call append, and then if everything went right, it's going to, down in the debugger here, it's going to tell us that append was completed successfully. So, it says it was completed successfully. Now if we hop over to Workforce, and I zoom in, I believe it's San Diego, if I remember correctly. If I appended to the right file. Let me just see here. I might have opened the wrong Workforce project. Nope, there we go. So now I've got a series of assignments. So these were all loaded from that CSV that I passed it, and I can start assigning those to individuals. I can update some additional information. So it's a really good way to kind of load data from external systems into ArcGIS. And I think that's all I have, right?
Cool.
Hand it over to Chris.
Number 4.
4. And you need a mic.
Nope, I'm good.
All right.
All right, so I'm going to build on what Paul discussed with updating data and discussing overwriting data. So now that we've added the ability to append and update your existing data, what does that mean for overwrite? Like, when do you want to use overwrite versus append or update? Well, basically, overwrite is, as it says and as has been done, is that it will completely overwrite your data set. So whatever you pass in as your new data source, your existing data will be gone and replaced by what you just uploaded. And ultimately what that means then is that you can delete existing records. And what kind of case would that be applicable when you wouldn't want to do append? And in one of the cases, and this is happened back in January in Ventura County, is Thomas Fire evacuation zones. Is the evacuation zones change over time, and not just in a sense where the geometry changes, but some evacuation zones go away. So that's a perfect candidate for something you want to overwrite, and then probably overwrite on a regular schedule. So what I want to do is a quick demo of that. So I have my evacuation zones and I have it overlaid on top of my burn areas, and what I'm going to walk through is that maybe evacuation zone 1, that the evacuation order has been lifted, it's safe for families to start moving back into their homes, or to kind of start damage assessment. And then maybe there's now more zones that need to be evacuated. So I'm at the evacuation zones feature layer, and what Paul was showing with the update data, you have append, and then you also have overwrite. And I have updated evacuation zones file geodatabase. And this will take just a second. And at that point, we should be able to see our updated evacuation zones. And of course, this is on our QA server as well, so it seems to be going especially slow now. But that's basically what it comes down to for overwrite, is when you have to delete records and as do an overall replace, that is when you would do that versus append or update. And we can come back to this in just a second. Aha, there it goes.
Just got to threaten it.
All right. And let's go ahead and refresh, and I bet it's there. Aha, all right, so what you see is that evacuation zone 1 has now been removed, the order's been lifted, and I added evacuation zone 11 to reflect that, hey, the fire is moving in this direction and the order has been sent, and we need to start broadcasting this to the community. All right.
Chris, is there any downtime when you overwrite the data?
Just for the moment it takes to perform the overwrite, which then append and update, that's not the case. The layer is accessible, and the existing data, as whatever the state of the data is at that time is what you would be able to access. All right. So the next step is that, all right, so that was a disaster response map for getting families out of harm's way. But the next aspect of disaster response might be something where you start performing damage assessments. And something that both Jeremy and Paul mentioned earlier is that we have a set of focused data collection templates where you can create a new feature layer with a preset schema without any features. And so they're all industry specific, from gas, utilities, natural resources, and in this case I want to select public safety. And I'm going to create a damage assessment layer. And depending on your workflow, you could enable or disable any of these layers. And if you would be going out in the field with a collector and you need to capture the GPS receiver information, you can enable this here, and that will add the schema to the layer, and collector will automatically start collecting the GPS receiver information on a per record basis, which is invaluable for high accuracy workflows. But in this case, I don't think we need it. So I'm going to go on and then enter a title, and you create the layer, and at this point you would have an empty layer. And I knew this one would take a few minutes, so I happen to have one already created. All right, so I have a Thomas Fire damage reports feature layer, which at this point it's empty. I created it from our data collection templates. And to show you it's empty, you have the features here, and as Jeremy talked about earlier, is that you could then modify the schema to fit your specific needs, whether that's deleting a field or that's adding a field. So you can really carve these feature layers out to fit your specific workflow. Nope, you can do that at any point. And then just whatever attributes are associated with that field, if you delete it, would be gone. And then if you do add a field, you can then perform calculation from your other fields to get new attribute data. All right, so in this case though, I really don't want an empty layer. Oh, I have a, sorry, mixed demo. But anyways, if you had seed data that you wanted to start with, you could upload it here. And maybe that's something like, hey, you have the addresses and the home locations that you know that you want inspectors to go out to, is that you can go ahead and put it here and you can have it preloaded. And then it's something where the inspectors already have the address. Now they need to go and actually assess the damage. All right, so I have this damage reports layer. How would this data be taken in? It'd probably be coming after a disaster from a lot of different vectors. Whether it's local agencies going out and performing inspections, whether it's federal government agencies such as FEMA, or maybe it's even something like being crowdsourced. You create a layer, you make it available in a web app builder app, and then hey, report damage in your area, and we'll get an inspector out as fast as possible to start appraising and get that process going. But what you don't want in these cases is you don't want to make a feature layer public and have it editable by everybody in the world, and they can then see somebody's data. So if you're reporting, some damage is done here, maybe you don't want others to see that. So you potentially want a layer that you can take in data, but you don't want others to see it, or at least the public to see it. And you can control this through the feature layer editing capabilities. And this is something that Jeremy mentioned earlier.
Could you zoom in, Chris?
Oh. All right, good. All right, and when used in conjunction with feature layer views, where you can set the definition by area, by attributes, or by hiding the fields, is that you can really get into a granular representation of your data for the individuals that you want to make it available. So, a couple examples would be, all right, so I have the damage reports layer, and of course I want it to be editable because I'm taking in data. And I want this layer to be the actual one that the public sees. And this is one where they're gonna start submitting the damage assessment, and maybe even through something like Survey 123. So I only want the public to be able to add features. But then I also don't want them to be able to see any features. So while I might get multiple reports for the same area, hey, the 7-Eleven down here is damaged, where 10 people report it, you can QA and QC that later and clean it up. But ultimately, you may not want anybody, any public person, to be able to see the features that they are being added. So with this combination right here, you could add features while not allowing any of the editors that can access the feature to be able to, or be able to add features, be able to actually access the features. And you could spin this up actually as a view of your primary data set. And then from there, you could, I can save this and make it available and the public can start editing, but what does that mean for your internal editors who might actually have to QA the data? Well, you can then spin up a different view, and maybe in that case, you want them to be able to add, update, and delete features. And they can see all the features and edit all the features, and then have the full management of the data. And you can also do things like, hey, maybe I only want the public, that's the only way I need to do QC there. For my inspectors who are going to do editing, they need to be responsible for actually making sure their edits and their features and their damage reports are valid. So maybe you want them to edit their own, but you don't want them to edit other people's features that they've added and reported. So you can control that through here. And then, again, when combined with a view, you can set a view definition that only certain editors can only see edits by other individuals. Or maybe only hey, if I have an editor, an inspector assigned to zone 1, I can actually spatially define that in my view, where they can't see anything else. Or maybe they can, but it's only a read-only fashion. So really, this is really over the past, year and a half, ArcGIS Online has really evolved to be something where you can really granularly control who and how they can edit your data and they can view it. So, and then, create as many views as you need to satisfy that while still having your primary data set. And then I think that's it for that. Shifting gears, how many folks, sorry, go ahead. So the question was if you have a view and you set, an area filter to refine it to only a geographic area, and you share it with like 100 people or whatever. They can only show like this. So the people that can access that view, they would only be able to see the area you defined for them, and it's secure. So it's not, they couldn't define features outside of that. They couldn't do some tricks to like sniff browser traffic to kind of see what's going on there. That is securely the only thing they can see through that view. No, it does not prevent adding the feature. So if it's actually, so the question was, if you have a view and you have an area filter, and then and it's editable, and then folks start adding edits or features outside of the view, they'll be taken. They just won't see them. So it'd be something where, the feature's taken in outside of the view, and it's actually then stored in the database. Nobody else that can see the view would see that feature, and even the editor, as soon as they refresh, they would no longer see the feature they just added.
On that too as well, we are looking down the road to be able to expose some of that area of interest metadata. So if you're a custom app developer and you do want to have that restriction in your app, you could take advantage of that area of interest and then enforce that on an app by app basis. In some cases, it'll make sense to let those edit through, and in other cases, you want to be stricter about it. So it is something that we're looking to expose so that the app can decide how to handle that specific behavior. Yeah, you could definitely do it with an attribute rule down the road. But
Metadata, Chris?
Yes. All right.
That's
So,
alive.
how many folks have metadata associated with their feature classes?
Yeah, see?
And how many is it that's where it lives, and that's about the only place it lives unless you do some manual work to get it anywhere else? All right. So, with the April release in ArcGIS Online, we are going to start honoring your feature class metadata when you publish it to online. It will live with the layer. It will live, actually with the service, and it will be accessible from the layer endpoint. And it will be something that, currently, for the April release, it'll be read-only, but eventually we're going to expose an editing story. And so if you can either then edit in the UI, or if you overwrite, or you do some of these cases, that you can then just, keep your feature class metadata in sync with the actual feature layer that's exposed to, the people that you expose it to. I'll do a quick demo of this. All right, so I have a Pro open, Pro 2.1, and I have a feature class in a file database of hurricanes in the Atlantic Basin. And nothing special about this metadata. I have some stuff that I've added over time. And what I want to show, though, is that I can make some changes here. I'm going to save it to my feature class and go right here and view it real quick. And you'll see where was my edit. Somebody saw it.
someone knows their metadata.
All right, here. All right. Credits, it does something. All right. So I'm going to publish this real quick. I'm not going to really make any configuration changes. I could potentially edit the metadata here at the layer level rather than the feature class level. Maybe you have a some sort of definition expression and it changes the meaning of your metadata, and you need to make some modifications here. Whatever it may be. But if you can edit your feature class metadata and associate with the layer that you're then publishing. All right. And so I'm going to share this as a web layer real quick. And no other changes. And I have one already existing. All right. So let's see how long this takes. So,
Does that take a long time, Chris?
I should just take a second. Shoot, where is I? All right. So when you publish your data in ArcGIS Online, it's a by value copy. Your data's copied to the cloud. So it's not a live connection to your feature class. But those of you that have a portal on premises and you publish through a federated workflow to federated servers, this will be available there as well, and will actually be the metadata available on the service will be a live representation of the data on the metadata on the feature class. So if you make an edit there, the service would reflect it right away. And let's see. Aha, okay, cool, it's there. All right, so we don't have the UI in place for showing the metadata as an option when the layer has it. However, imagine that under this layers list, you have all these options for the layer. There's a nice little metadata button there, and that's the metadata associated with the layer. And you can still then, of course, configure the metadata for the overall item for the service itself here. And this is, there will also be service level metadata in addition to the layer level metadata you can author.
Cool.
So real quick, I have the URL open.
What's that? Yeah, it comes in April 10th. Yeah.
All right, and so this is the metadata on the service endpoint. And you can see that here. I have my feature service, the Atlantic Hurricanes, and this is layer 0, and this is the metadata that actually lives on the service. And see, it made my changes, and so I have my feature class metadata available with the service. And something we're going to expose is read-only for right now, but it's something we're going to evolve over time, and it's been a long time coming.
Okay, cool, Chris. One last thing. How many people have got that this is on production with census tracts? Let me zoom out once, and twice, and how many people have gotten this little yellow thing? Yes. So one of the big things that we showed in the plenary, but hopefully it came out, is that we're moving to WebGL and faster access to feature data from online. So if I do that same experience again with what's coming out in April, I'll be able to go all the way back out pretty far. It won't be unlimited, but it'll be way more than what it is today. And you still be able to work with this data just like it was one of your existing layers, and do fast updates, right on the screen. So not directly related to managing your data, but it's if your data comes faster and it's more lively, then that makes everything better. All right, thank you, everyone.